I find perplexing the idea that NATO is irrelevant. If you just look at the world today and you look at the role NATO is playing in events this minute, as we look at Russian aggression pushing up against Europe, if we look at cyber and the ongoing conflict in cyber, we look at aggressive behaviors in the north, in the high north, in the Arctic. If you look at terrorism from the south, NATO's been very involved in helping dismantle the Islamic State. NATO helped stop piracy off the coast of Africa. Remember piracy? Remember the movie Captain Phillips? It's kind of like the Islamic State. Whatever happened to piracy? Whatever happened to the Islamic State? We went after it, and that is part of NATO. Remember the Balkans? Remember the 1990s? Remember Sarajevo? Remember a place called Srebrenica? 16,000 men and boys executed over a week. A place called Srebrenica. Who solved that? NATO. So, no, I reject the theory that somehow we ought to just close up the NATO shop. In terms of what NATO can do in Ukraine, it's doing exactly what it should right now. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. I think that's unfortunate if you're Ukrainian, but they're not. Therefore, we are not obligated to put troops there. We're not obligated to send our men and women there to fight. But we, NATO, believe in democracy and liberty and the freedoms we talked about. We don't believe that authoritarian states should simply march across borders and annex other countries. You know, we saw that movie before in the 1930s, right? It didn't turn out well then, and it won't turn out well now. So what NATO should do is provide the Ukrainians with the means to fight. And believe me, they will fight. I've spent a fair amount of time in Ukraine. It is not going to be a layup for Vladimir Putin, particularly with NATO equipment, intelligence, cyber, logistics, ammunition. That's what we ought to be doing. And I hope Vladimir Putin is listening somewhere, not to me, but to Tony Blinken and Joe Biden and others, because if he thinks Russia had problems in Chechnya, wait till he tries to take over Ukraine. We can help make sure that doesn't happen. That's a role for NATO.